What is Kevin Warren saying? What is he thinking with the NIL, saying that the federal legislation is necessary? Really? I don't get that.
Well, so, he has said this. Greg Sankey of the SEC has said this. A lot of leaders in college sports have said it. And it's asking someone to come solve your problems, but also you don't know exactly what they would even do. And I think, obviously at this point, everyone's waiting for the midterms to see, which party is in charge, because with the different proposals that we've seen in the past about NIL, the Republican side, they were more narrow and kind of more specific to just NIL. And there were some proposals from Democratic senators and representatives that were more wide ranging, that maybe healthcare, maybe, the ability to collectively bargain for athletes. Like there were other topics that got put into a bill that would also address NIL and those economic opportunities. But honestly, this hasn't really been a thing that has felt like it has had a sense of urgency since last summer, when NIL was about to come down in a bunch of different states and everyone was really frantic. And you had Mark Emmert, the NCAA president, and you had these commissioners saying, we need a federal solution. We need something that is national so the rules are the same for everyone. And what ended up happening after the Supreme Court ruling last year was, deferring to schools, deferring to state laws, deferring, and kind of the preview of what a deregulated NCAA space is going to look like because of legal issues. And you know what? The world still spins and the world still turns, and things have existed and happened, and you have different rules in different places. And so the urgency kind of went away, I think, once, the world kept going. So I don't really know, if there is going to be federal legislation, if there is going to be, federal help here, or even if it's going to be what some of these leaders even want. But I think what they're really asking for is the ability to have rules and regulations around this stuff and not get sued. And we know that, they're trying to get antitrust protections. And Mark Emmert has asked about that, has talked about that. But really, again, in a world after last summer's Supreme Court ruling, the NCAA has to be really careful. And that's why I just think this is all going to be deregulated, to your earlier point about, the Big Ten could set their own rules and see what happens from that. That is more likely to happen because that is a better strategy in this legal environment. You can't collude with all of these other conferences and all of these other schools to set restrictions on this for athletes. We're just not going to go in that direction, and we're only moving in an area where athletes are going to be able to earn and to have opportunities. You're not going to be moving towards a way where people are going to restrict that.
Absolutely. And, Michigan's got a top-notch law school. I know that for a fact. I mean, I'm sure there are other Big Ten legal minds that can all get together and come up with something that Kevin Warren can present to athletic directors and school presidents. And the Big Ten just leads on that front. But maybe they'd be concerned that if the NIL rules that they play by are not where other people are played by, then suddenly they lose in the recruiting and suddenly they can't compete when there's a college football playoff scenario that's actually codified, that's new. Maybe that's it, Nicole. I don't know. What do you think?
I mean, I think a lot of this just kind of feels like we're in this period of transition and flux, that this stuff is going to change. I mean, I even think about it when I think about all the hand-wringing about NIL and boosters and collectives. It doesn't feel like this is the end destination of any of this stuff. I mean, it certainly, people are more and more talking about, what happens if you get to an employee-employer model, you have collective bargaining or a union or something like that, and there's revenue sharing, right? It feels like you're moving more towards that direction where there could be a lot cleaner of a system where you don't have third parties. You don't have to, part of the reason everyone's freaking out or asking for guardrails is because, if you're dealing with boosters and third parties, you can't control them. It would be actually quite a bit simpler if a school could just pay the athlete directly or set up the deal directly, right? But that wasn't something anyone wanted to do or felt comfortable with. But it's possible that we are going to move in directions that almost simplify some of this stuff. Or again, you get into a revenue sharing model at some point and it's negotiated on behalf of the athletes or whatever that is. So it's hard for me to make sweeping comments because it just doesn't feel like this is where we're going to live 5 years from now. It feels like we're going to be in a different environment and a different financial reality. And I think that, again, when you think about like, oh, why are some of these conferences moving, or why, do we talk about the Big Ten and SEC in a different stratosphere than everybody else? Well, it's like, if some of those outside factors come in, if the courts or Congress or people are asking, the collegiate model to change and to pay athletes directly in certain ways, you're going to need to have money for that. And so I think, it's obviously, stability and financial security, being able to offer sports. But I do think, everyone's kind of got their eye down the road, wondering and waiting to see, what's going to be the next major domino to fall that could, again, change like the economic reality of how college sports work.